It's interesting what you're saying about like artists want fans, and I totally agree with that. Like artists want fans in the end, but we also see that artists want different things. That's also what we're
Okay.
trying to address with Groover.
Okay.
Or they want
Break
different
it down
things
for
and they
me.
want different ways to get there. Fans
Okay.
is a goal in the end, but as we found between 3 and 4 different needs, I would say. The first one is indeed fans, audience, and they want numbers, and they want like to be sure that people are actually listening to their music. So it's more about like they want listeners, they want people, they want not to be alone. And I had like quotes by artists about like, I don't want just my mom and my dog to be listening to my music or things like that. Like it's about that, about like getting listeners, getting people at shows, getting and possibly making a living out of it. But it's also a different thing. Like not all artists have like, I want to make money or I want to make a living out of it. Some artists are also like, I want listeners first. And that's actually what we find they want first.
What's going on? Welcome to The New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book, 3rd edition, out now everywhere, audiobook, ebook, hardcover, however you like books, you can find the book. Today, my guest is Dorian Perron. He is the co-founder of the platform Groover. Now, Groover is a submissions platform connecting artists and managers, labels with tastemakers and curators, playlisters, bloggers, record labels, booking, talent buyers, that sort of thing, YouTubers, basically anyone with a platform that is looking for talent or looking for submissions. This is a platform that connects the artists with those curators. Now, I'll let Dorian explain to you exactly what Groover does and how they work. If you're a working artist, I'm sure that you've either heard of Groover or you've worked with platforms similar to Groover. There's a bunch out there. Groover is actually a legitimate one. And we spent a good amount of time talking about streaming fraud. And you want to make sure that you're going to avoid the shady companies out there that are promising you the world, and they will most likely just get your music removed from streaming services, and they will get you banned and blocked from your distributors. You got to be really careful about this. So we talk all about this. Now, what Groover is mostly known for is their playlisting curator feature. So user-generated playlists, those curators basically come to Groover, and they will put up their profiles and show the playlists that they have. And then artists can essentially submit to these playlist curators. And these are, mind you, user-generated playlist curators. We're not talking about the official editorial, the official editors at Spotify or Apple Music or anything. These are user-generated playlists. You can pay a few bucks to submit to these playlists. Now, we go into extreme detail on how this works. I've tested it. I've done a deep dive with all of this. And we talk about if it's effective, if this works, is this ethical? How do they prevent bots? All of that stuff. We go very, very deep into all of this. So if you do any form of DIY promotion with streaming and the streaming platforms with your music, you're definitely going to want to listen to how all this works, because we don't just talk about Groover. They're one of the biggest players in the space right now. There are a few others out there. I've had a couple of the other ones on the show previously, but it really kind of pulls the curtain back to this business, this whole ecosystem that exists within kind of the music industry, the streaming industry, and how there are these individuals that are making a bit of money curating their playlists and how they're doing and charging for consideration, not for placement, because that's illegal, charging for consideration. So we talk all about it, and we really dive very, very deep into it. Now, if you want to test out Groover, they gave us a code to pass along. So you can use the code Ari's Take for 15% off your first campaign. Go check it out. Let me know what you think. I gave it a whirl. I tell you about my unfiltered thoughts, and I tell Dorian directly this. So you want to stick around to listen to towards the end when I talk about my experience with Groover. You can find Groover on their website. That's probably the best way. They're also on the socials, but it's just Groover, Groover. Now, they are based in France, and so there are a lot of French curators. They started in the US, but they have worldwide curators from all over. If you want to check out Groover, just head over to Groover, Groover.co. That's probably the best way. That's where you can find them. If you want to check out all of us at Ari's Take, you can find us on the socials at Ari's Take on Instagram, TikTok, X, Threads, all of that stuff. But visit aristake.com, get on our email list. That is the best way to stay in touch with us. We'll send you all the new info about the new music business whenever there's something important you should know. Go to aristech.com and get on that email list. But right now, if you could just pause this episode, give us a 5-star review, hit the thumbs up, hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button, however you're listening to this, if you want to keep these episodes coming in your feed. All right, let's kick into the show. Dorian Perron, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Ari.
Of course. So a lot of people are familiar with Groover, but there are a lot of people listening that have never heard of Groover before. In your own words, just explain what Groover is.
Groover is a platform that helps artists and also their representatives get in touch with music curators, tastemakers, and professionals. The main idea behind Groover is that when we started, we saw that independent musicians had a lot of issues they were encountering every day. And one of the biggest ones was the access to tastemakers, blogs, radio stations, playlists, labels, and they were sending hundreds of emails every day and getting no answers. And it was not like they were getting no or declines. They were just getting like no answers, like sending messages in a bottle. And our idea was, how can we build something that guarantees that the people on the other side are going to at least listen to the music and answer, so give feedback, positive or negative, and find a system that would guarantee that while ensuring that the creators and the tastemakers remain independent on an editorial point of view. So basically, Groover is helping artists connect with creators of their choice, and we guarantee them that their music is listened to and they get feedback on it, positive or negative.
Yeah, and as an artist myself, it's when sending something into the void, and it's almost worse to not get a response and not get an answer than to get a rejection. Honestly, it might be a little masochistic of me, but I prefer a rejection over a non-answer, to be honest. Like I just, at least if somebody says no to me, I can move on. Otherwise I'm sending email after email after phone call after phone call after DM, and it's just like, are you even getting these? Or are you like intentionally ghosting me? Like, is this, you're not responding to me because you hate me, because my music's awful, or just like my emails are going to spam? I don't know, but I'm inferring the worst. So I prefer a hard no over just don't respond.
It's honestly terrible, and it's exactly what happened when we started. We interviewed and we talked to a lot of artists, and they were telling us the exact same thing, that they were getting no answers, and was like really, really complicated for them to understand if it was just because their music was bad, or if they they were really like asking themselves questions about like, should I keep on going? I'm getting like no response at all. And on the other side, I was a music blogger on my end, and Romain and Raphael, who founded it with me, Romain was an artist, and he's still an artist. And I was receiving a lot of emails from artists, and it was also frustrating me not to be able to get back to them, like to answer and listen. And the biggest problem was the realization that it was not about like taking the time to answer. It was having the time to click on the link and listen to the track when you're getting more than 100 emails per day. And it was just impossible. I had to pay for the extra storage on Google Drive, for the more than 15, just to store all the emails I was receiving every day. And I think I had more emails sent by musicians than I had visitors daily on the website, which is crazy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, that ain't that the state of the music industry? It's just like, there's more musicians out there than fans to listen to the music, which isn't true, but at least the active consumers of a lot of at least like actively seeking out music. Maybe the tastemakers or the music lovers are the ones visiting the blogs historically. Now, I'm assuming that was well, how long ago was that? Because blogs aren't really what they once were. So when you were writing the blog and got Groover started, when was that?
So I started the blog in 2013, and Groover started end of 2017. So blogs were still a thing, but they were already on the decline. And when we started and we were focusing on like onboarding blogs, very rapidly we realized, and I think we knew that, but we realized it very actively, that what you can call like a curator or a tastemaker, they had like exploded in a lot of different types of people who can actually share music and have an audience of people who
Yep.
are following what they are suggesting. And there were not blogs anymore, but there were other formats. There were already like people sharing videos or podcasts, or people creating and curating playlists. And it
Right.
was already starting, and there were already like labels. We realized that a lot of record labels were actually acting as labels, acting like bringing their brand to a track and acting as creators themselves. So it was interesting to see that YouTube channels as well, like so many different types of creators and professionals. And in the beginning, it was very hard to find the right name for it. Like we ended up using Curators, but we were like, and also like we French, like we were in the US when we started the company, but curator in French, it's like nobody knows what it is. It's like it doesn't work. So we're like, how are we gonna call these people? And it was complicated because it was like a whole bunch of very different types of people.
No, I like the term curator as the catch-all for all of this. And that's more widely understood because, what is the overall umbrella term? I guess tastemaker, but that could be something else. Or, when we get more specific, of course, it's like blogger or playlister, playlist editor, label A&R, YouTuber. I mean, those are specific, but the catch-all umbrella term that you're using is curator. So, so you're based in... Well, where are you based now? You said U.S., but it's a French company?
Yeah, it's a French company. We all from Paris, but we started the company when we were in California for 6 months. We were at UC Berkeley, and we were part of an entrepreneurship program. And what happened is that we didn't know what we were going to work on, but we had all finished our studies, and we didn't feel like going, and I would say like the traditional way that like people who get out of schools or universities go and get a job and everything. And I knew it was not for me. And so when we did that program, it was an opportunity to meet with people. And I already had my blog. Romain had already like released an album and created a record label with his father, more focusing on like indie rock. And we knew we wanted to, like we had met issues that artists and musicians were encountering, and we were already deeply caring about that. And we knew a bit about the industry and the jobs there. And so we're like, maybe our best shot would be to work in something we're very passionate about, and we feel there are lots of things to do in. And so we started exploring that field.
Cool. So, over the last, I guess since you started Groover in 2017, but definitely over the last 8 years or so, playlists kind of what has been dominating the conversation. Up until we get to the TikTok era, which started about 4 years ago or so. But we'll get to that in a minute. I want to focus on playlists for a second because although Groover started with the intention of kind of bringing in these tastemakers and coming from a blogger's perspective, finding a way to kind of help manage that system, which, like you said, was virtually impossible to manage as a blogger, as a tastemaker, a curator, with so many emails. So where we're at now, and I'm going to contextualize this for a second, and then I want you to speak to the Groover's solution or proposed solution or what you're doing in the playlisting realm. So we all know the difference between the various playlists, and let's use Spotify as just kind of the focus for the minute, mostly because they're the largest streaming platform in the world, the most influential, the most powerful, has the most users outside of China. And so those numbers are public, and it drives a lot of the conversation. We use Spotify monthly listeners almost as a a currency these days and a metric to gauge, someone's popularity and fan base and all of that. So, that is where the majority of the attention is on, just because those numbers are public. So, that all being said, we know there's various different kinds of playlists on Spotify. We have the official Spotify editorial playlists, which are the ones created by employees of Spotify. Those are the big ones. Well, there's thousands of those playlists, everything from, today's top hits and Rap Caviar down to, your favorite coffee shop and whatever. These playlists have been around forever. Then Spotify playlists have evolved into personalized playlists. So a lot of these editorial ones created by people have either completely gone away or have evolved into a more algorithmically generated, personalized playlist, also created by Spotify, the algorithm. It's personalized for the user. They get to know what people are listening to, and they start to feed more of those playlists. So, each of our playlists, even if it's the same playlist, your favorite coffee house and my favorite coffee, it's going to be different. Our order is going to be different. The songs included are going to be different because it's personalized. That's the algorithm of Spotify. Now, the third category, which we're really going to focus on, is the one that Groover deals with, and that is the user-generated playlists. These are the ones created by anyone. I have a playlist. Many people have playlists. I mean, we all have tons of playlists, but I have a very public playlist with tens of thousands of followers to it and stuff like that. And that's the one that indie artists, musicians, well, not even just indie, labels do this too. All artists, let's just say, have really tried to get their music into these playlists that theoretically could drive a lot of targeted listeners, which would ideally turn into fans, turns into, helps their Spotify numbers, all of that. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that is what Groover is focusing on. So you're bringing in these curators of these playlists, you're bringing them to the platform, and then you're essentially helping artists, labels, managers connect and pitch their songs to these playlisters. Is that right?
When it comes to playlists, this is what we do.
Yes.
I'm mentioning that because we still not focusing only on helping artists get in touch with independent playlists. And it's one of the things we've been focusing on since the beginning, since it's always been about like making connections and helping artists connect. We also have a lot of record labels, still blogs, YouTube channels. We even created a DJ category so producers can get in touch with DJs. So we've not focusing only about playlists, but to get back to your point, playlist is indeed one of the things that artists are the most interested in and focusing on.
Right.
And what's interesting is how it has become the number one thing, but it wasn't when we started. And I would say like it was started to become the number one thing in the US when we started, but in France, we're always late about everything. Like even Crisis hit us late. Playlist came very late, much later. So it's interesting to see how it evolved as the paramount of like what people are focusing on, but it wasn't the case before. And it might change. I don't know into what, but it might change over time for many different reasons or things. But it's true that we're focusing on that type of place you're mentioning, user-generated playlists. And the reason for that is that it's possibly the only ones you can, as an artist, actively get onto or at least influence. You can influence algorithmic playlists, but you can only do it indirectly. There are ways to influence them, but it's more indirect. The only ones you can directly impact are the independent ones. And it's not an end in itself. It's usually a way to grow your audience and your listeners and to position your music so that you can get discovered by potentially editorials. So the first type of players you mentioned, or potentially the algorithms. So the algorithmic playlist, and also like the personalized editorialized. So now it's getting a bit like complicated. But basically, if we separate this in three categories, each of them nourish the other ones. Like if you get onto like very coherent and really nicely curated independent playlists, you might get recommended into algorithmic ones. Then if your track works well in the algorithmic ones, people at the editorial teams at Spotify might get alerts about that particular track and might put it on an editorial playlist, but you can go in different ways like that. I know a lot of artists, it was their first or second release and they got added to an editorial playlist from the start. You don't know exactly why. Maybe it's chance, maybe it's a personal relationship, maybe it's just the perfect track for that playlist. But it happens. It's it's not what happens most of the time.
Yeah. No, you're right. Okay. So, and I do want to, we are going to get to everything else that Groover does, but like you said, this is the thing that artists are, the most popular aspect of it. This is what artists are looking for the most. And like you said, it is the, one of the only ways to directly, get onto these playlists. A plus B equals C. Whereas like, we don't know what C is when it comes to the personalized or algorithmic playlists on Spotify. We don't. A plus W might equal C for that. We have no idea how the Spotify algorithm works. We have some ideas, I should say, but like they're all educated guesses. They're not saying like if you do this and then this and then this, it's going to trigger the algorithm.
Yeah.
Where it's just like they keep that highly guarded. So. Yes, we all know that like the algorithmic playlists can be the most powerful out there, considering because they're so personalized, and then they kind of theoretically can work on top of each other. There are tools within Spotify, marketing tools that help influence that. Like there's the showcase tools. There's discovery mode. Marquee for new releases. Exactly. That those are built-in tools within Spotify that you can pay Spotify, or you can give up a percentage of your royalties to kind of juice up those algorithms and juice up the songs for the playlist. Now, putting that aside, back to kind of what Groover's doing, just to break it down to the core, how does this work? So you have a bunch of playlisters on the platform. How many do you have? Do you have a number of how many curators you have on the platform, or playlisters?
I don't have like the exact number in my mind, but I would say it represents around 1,000. While our total curators community is closer to 2,500 and 3,000. So it represents around a third of our total community, and it's like around 1,000, I would say.
Okay, so you have about 1,000 playlist curators. I'm assuming of all different genres and everything like that. Now, how does it work specifically if I want to pitch, I want to like theoretically get my songs into these playlists? How does this work?
So as an artist, you can go to Groover, of course. If you type Groover on Google, if we did a good job, you'll find Groover pretty much at the top. Then you add a link to your track. You add your pitch and like a small pitch about your release and context around it, the same way you would pitch to editorials on Spotify for artists, or like a short bio or a short pitch about like your release itself. And then you choose who you want to get in touch with in the full list of all the curators that are available. The important thing to keep in mind is that it's not like an endless catalog of everyone who has ever been here that is like added all the time. It's really the ones that are currently active. So they're currently reviewing tracks, listening to them, and making a decision whether they want to share it or not. You choose who you want to get in touch with. There are filters that help you select genres and even subgenres. So we try to be as detailed as possible to help you find the ones that are the most likely to appreciate your track. You can target by country. You can target by the type of curator. So in that case, you can target by Spotify playlists. We have advanced filters where you can select the top curators or the most impactful ones. We are detailing this more and more. And we also give you information whether your track is matching that playlist in terms of the language you're doing, or whether this playlist accepts like unreleased or released track. We really like detailing that as much as we can. And over time, it's complicated because it's a whole matching system. So you need to have the right tags on one side and right tags on the other side. And detailing and growing that is quite technically complicated, but we're putting more and more energy on that over time. So you choose who you want to get in touch with, and you pay small amounts of money for each. So the base price is €2 today by contact. But we also have top curators that cost between 4 and 6 because they're more influential. The idea for us when we created that new tier was it was a way for us to attract and retain some curators that were telling us it was not the value for their time because they had other ways to finance and fund their activity, or it was not time for money. Like it wasn't money for the. We couldn't buy that time considering tracks through the platform at such a low price.
Sure.
According to them. And so we created these new tiers to be able to attract more influential curators on the platform. But still, it's like between 2 and 4 and 6 euros. You select how many you want. Like you can select from 5 curators. The minimum is like 10 euros spent on the platform. And you can go up to the number you want. We have people who do select all and send. We really don't recommend you to do that because like your music is in a specific type and in a specific cluster of and a specific genre. So you should definitely spend time selecting the right filters. And if you have the time, I would really recommend looking at the different profiles and really choosing the ones that you think are the most relevant for your music. And then you pay. And within a week, the people are going to listen, the creators are going to listen to your music. They're going to make a decision whether they want to share your track or not. And I'm talking only about playlists now, like to ease
Yep.
to ease that part. And if they don't want to share it, or if they want to share it, they still have to write a piece of feedback. We give guidelines to them and really monitor what they're writing. We're looking a lot at that. They are rated, but you can rate them after that. So we look at that part, and then you get these answers throughout the week. And if they don't answer after 7 days, you get credits back, and you can get in touch with new curators and professionals.
Cool. Yeah, great. And I just want to clarify that the artists are paying these curators for consideration, not for placement.
Yeah, there's no incentive to share. We don't pay them more if they decide to share the track. So that way they're completely independent in the way they're curating the playlist. So they can decide to share it or not, but they have to answer the artist, but they have to spend time listening to the music and the track. And there's a very important thing, and it's something we're debating a lot with artists and people around about, like the reply itself and the piece of feedback itself. You were probably going to ask questions about that, but we've tried removing that part, and what we realized is that it's terrible when we remove that part. Like just asking the creators to listen to the track is not working because they're not giving proper consideration to the track, because they don't have like responsibility. Then they're not the same way committed to like, I need to answer the artist, so say what I think about that track. We did some tests, and we saw that like when they need to give feedback, they tend to share many more tracks because they're actually considering the track itself.
Sure, and that makes sense. And I'm clarifying the point that people are paying for consideration, not placement, because specifically paying to get into a playlist is against Spotify's terms. And streaming fraud is one of the biggest, most challenging aspects of the modern music industry. And I wrote a piece on Variety all about this, talking about, the tactics that a lot of the distributors are taking and the DSPs are taking, the streaming services, to combat streaming fraud. And for those of people listening, just for a brief moment to explain what streaming fraud is and artificial streaming and what is going on, if you're this is the first you're hearing about it, or just to get caught up, because this is honestly one of the biggest problems of the music industry right now. There's no denying it. Because of the payment structure of streaming services, where it's paid on a pro rata model, meaning that the total amount of money that the streaming service brings in, they're going to pay out about 70% of all that money to the rights holders. And the way that money gets divvied up is based on kind of stream share, the proportion of streams that I got versus the proportion versus all the streams on the platform is that same proportion amount of money I'm going to get based all the money that is paid out on the platform. So if I get 1% of all streams, I'm going to get essentially 1% of all the money. And that's kind of how the payment model works. Now, you can understand and imagine that there are there are fraudsters out there. There are people that have figured out how to game the system. They're tend to not actually be musicians. These are people that are just like looking to just, actual mobsters. The mafia has used this to kind of game the system. That was a well-reported case. That's actually true.
And very, very different kinds of mobsters that found very various way to game the system. So it's crazy.
And to launder money and all the way. But you can see, like, it's not too far-fetched to see, like, oh, if I can just divert a certain number of streams my way, I'm going to divert a certain amount of money my way. And if I can get, even a fraction of the total streams, let's just say, just using round numbers, if I'm currently getting 1%, and if I can increase that to 2% of total streams, which nobody has 2% of total streams, maybe Taylor Swift or something, but like, let's just say that's a lot of money, and that's a significant amount. So there are fraudsters that are coming in here. There are people that are coming in there that are figuring out how to game the system, hack the system to artificially, by using bots, by using stream farms or whatever, hackers that have hacked into unassuming real human profiles, and then they hack into their profiles, and then they just start listening to the songs that they have released, and the user is just none the wiser, because, like, why would anyone want to hack into my Spotify profile? So there's all these different ways, and I've had a previous episode with one of the companies that is actually monitoring and trying to combat this on behalf of the labels and on behalf of the streaming services. BeatDap is the name of that company. But anyway, so streaming fraud is such a huge issue right now that the streaming services are now fining the distributors if they catch distributors distributing music that have a lot of artificial streams detected on their account. Now, I have previously highlighted when I did my piece, there are these artists that are using some services. Now, Groover was not one that came up specifically, but other ones did come up that are quote unquote like legitimate services, meaning they're not. There are a lot of illegitimate services. There are a lot of scams out there that say, yep, pay us $1,000 and we'll get you 1 million streams. That's a scam. Like, you can't guarantee streams that way.
And that's an important part of it. It's any service that will tell you, I will bring you, I will guarantee you organic plays. They can use and they use usually the term organic to try to reassure you.
Right.
They are always fraud, or like almost always. And you should go from the principle that they are, because even if you find the one that found a way to game the system, they will end up being detected, because you can't guarantee streams. It's against Spotify rules. It means that they are doing something weird. If they are guaranteeing streams, it means that they are pushed. They're getting customers to be able to bring more streams to these people. So they are going to game the system so that they can guarantee you, 10,000 or 15,000 streams. And especially never buy a service on Fiverr that is going to guarantee you this. These are the worst ever. But one of the, I think it's something that is important there is it's not always, and it's not always, it's often, very often not the fault of musicians. Also, musicians can get added or can get added to artificially voted playlists, or they can get a peak of artificial streams, and they didn't do anything for it. And it's one of the worst parts, I think, of that system in itself.
And I highlighted a few of those artists in my Variety article, which I encourage everybody to read. We'll link that in the show notes for people to read. But yes, there are a lot of innocent artists getting caught up in this that then get their music ripped down from the streaming services. The distributors actually take their music down. They withhold royalties, even if the artist didn't do anything wrong. Or maybe they hired one of these services, they didn't realize it, because that's the challenging thing, is just I've investigated Groover. I know that Groover is not breaking the terms of service of Spotify. However, there are 100 other companies out there that look just like Groover, and it's hard to know, is this legit? Is this not legit? Am I hiring a company? They have a really good looking website, and I'm going to pay the same amount of money. are they going to get me flagged? Are they going to be, stuff taken down? Now, that also being said, there are other companies that I've also investigated that, similarly to Groover, are not breaking the terms of Spotify. However, artists that I've interviewed said they've used those other services, very similar to Groover. And after they used these services where it's the same kind of model where they paid a curator for consideration, whatever, their songs then got flagged for artificial streaming and their music got taken down. And they're like, well, what did I do wrong? I didn't use one of these bot services. I used, I thought, which was a legitimate service. So all that to say, my question to you is, how are you making sure that none of the curators that are on Groover with their playlist, that their playlists aren't botted, that their playlists won't trigger artificial streams for the artists that they put onto their playlist?
It's a super, super important point, because one of the tough things with that is that the data about what these playlists are generating in terms of streams is not publicly available. Like, in the sense that Spotify, there's not a Spotify for playlists the same way there's a Spotify for artists. It could be a solution in a sense, because like if the data was public, it would be very easy to check things on this and to make analysis. So what happens is that over time, and we started 3 or 4 years ago to realize that we needed to find our own sources of data to be able to measure that. So there are services that exist that really do a great job at finding ways to see, is this playlist generating actual streams for
what are some of
the
these
artist?
services? Give me some examples.
Some of those services are, Is It a Good Playlist? That is a really nice one.
Is It a Good Playlist? Like, that's the name of the thing. Is it a good playlist.com or something?
Is it a good playlist.com?
Cool.
You can find it. You can find it on Is it a good playlist.com. One of the first thing they found that I thought was like brilliant is you know that on Spotify on Spotify, when you're using it on desktop, on the desktop app, and you go on a profile on the profile of an artist, and you can find a discovered on section on when you can see all the playlists that have generated streams for the artist, and they are ranked by the ones that are generating the most streams in the last 30 days. So here you can. So Is It a Good Playlist? When you're putting, for example, a link to a playlist, they're going to look at all the tracks that have been added to this playlist, and they're going to check on the artist profiles. Is this playlist in this section, in this playlist, in the discovered on section for that artist, meaning they're generating streams. So this is more about performance or about how many streams it can bring, but it doesn't mean one of these playlists is not a fake one or hasn't been flagged yet by Spotify, which is still possible. You can still find some wrong or botted playlist in that section.
Because I just want to clarify what you're saying before we move on, just to hold for a moment for people that are still getting caught up, that aren't as familiar with this as you and I are. So because all the public playlists out there have what they're calling save numbers, and that just means how many people, it used to be called followers, how many people have clicked save to that playlist. And so that's a public number that we can see. So some of these playlists, like my low volume funk playlist, has like 53,000 saves. That means 53,000 people went to my playlist, clicked save. Click the check bar. I want to say. So that number's public. Now that doesn't say how many active listeners the playlist has, and so that's what you're saying.
There's no correlation. There's no correlation.
No correlation.
Yeah, no correlation between the saves and the actual play. So it's very important that you're saying that, because what I was mentioning before that was, how can we find a way to measure approximately that this place is generating this range of plays, of actual plays and streams, which is not a public data. It's not available.
It's not really, but like you said, if you can go to any artist profile, scroll all the way down on the desktop app to the discovered on, and they do rank the top most popular 50 playlists in order. So the top left one is what is generating the most listeners, and then the bottom right one is generating the least of the top 50. But if you look in your Spotify of the top 50, because if you look in your Spotify for artists, there's thousands more theoretically that they're just not listing there in the top 50. So you can see that. And I've gone down these rabbit holes, which I'm sure you have, where it's just like, oh, playlist number 7 there only has 8,000 saves, but playlist number 25 has 100,000 saves. That's wild. Like the one with only 8,000 saves is actually generating more listeners than the one with 100,000. And that happens all the time, like you just said.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because it's one of the ways that you can see that a playlist generates impact. And for example, on Is It a Good Playlist, they're both helping see if a playlist is generating impact and streams and showing numbers and pieces of data about like, is this playlist voted or not? And the way they look at it is they look at peaks of what you were mentioning, saves of followers. Like, is this playlist has for a day got like 20,000 new followers, which is like impossible to get like 20,000 followers to your playlist in a day. It's like, it means they have bought something, or they have bought possibly followers, which means they are likely possibly have also bought plays or ways to bring streams or plays to their playlist. So they're looking at this data. There's another tool that is really cool, which is called Artist Tools. I don't know if you know about this one, artist.tools. It's a cool platform because the way they're doing it is like they're saying, okay, we don't have data about everything, but we're going to look at a lot of different elements that are publicly available or we get access to. And we're going to build a score of like, this playlist is 100% voted because it was like flagged before. We've checked like all the elements correspond to what a botted playlist would be. Or they can tell you, okay, it's likely botted. It's possibly botted because they see that one of the indicators is wrong in the sense of like showing that this place is authentic and organically grown and everything. And they're very like educational in the way they're showing these pieces of data. So I really recommend any artist can use Artist Tools. They have a free plan. You can look at it. It's really working well. So these tools are really well. They have API. So we use the data from these tools to aggregate our own score internally. We also use another source of data because these are external tools. But another thing that I didn't mention is the third source that we have access to in a way, but not in the scale we want. It's like what I said about playlists not being like the numbers of the streams generated by playlists not being public. It's true, but it doesn't mean you don't have access to it because from Spotify for Artists, if you're using Spotify for Artists, you can see the list of playlists that have added your tracks, and you can see how many streams that generated by like in 28 days or in 7 days or in 90 days. So by artist, you can know for the place which have added your track. So you can check that. You can also check if they are like very weird numbers or a playlist that is very weird that has like increased your streams by 3,000. You also have a system now where you can report that playlist to Spotify so they can flag it and they can possibly take it down quickly. So this data, what we try to do is to get as much as possible from as many artists as possible. So there are different ways to do that. We can get them directly from the artist by asking like, it can be a viewer access or CSVs from Spotify for Artists. But there's another way to get it, which is distributors have access to this data for all the artists that distribute through a specific API, a Spotify bulk API. So distributors have access to this data. So we're trying to collaborate with some of the distributor partners that we have because we partnered up Groover with almost all the aggregators out there. So United Masters, TuneCore, Symphonic, CD Baby. I'm hoping I'm not forgetting too many. Amuse, like a lot of them. And so we're trying to collaborate with some of them so they can give access to some of this data to us so we can measure how many streams playlists are generating over time. So it's not giving information about like, are they artificial, but it's giving information about are these playlists generating impact. But I really recommend like a mixture of these services like Artist Tools, Is It a Good Playlist, and data you can get from your Spotify for Artists. It can give you an idea of, is this playlist artificial, is this playlist impactful?
Cool. That's super helpful, and I appreciate you outlining all of that and being so transparent, and also referring some of these tools that I'm going to check out for sure. I want to get more specific into kind of the how Groover works and is it actually effective? Because at the end of the day, artists don't care if they're on playlists or not. That's not why they're doing this. They don't like artists might say, I just want to be on playlists, but that's not actually what they want. What they actually want is more streams and more listeners. But that's also not actually what they really want. What they actually want is more fans that are going to support them for life so they can have a music career. If we really like get, down to the root of what artists are actually looking for, it's not, they don't care if it's playlists. Playlists didn't exist 10 years ago. It's not like, oh, I want to get on playlist. No. You want fans. So my and maybe the current state of we're at with these metrics and these vanity metrics and whatever, it's like, okay, we need more monthly listeners because like labels, blah, 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 But is Groover actually effective? Like when somebody pays you a bunch of money to submit to all these playlists, what are they? You just said the curators have no responsibility to actually put them on. So theoretically, all these curators could just listen to all this music, get paid to listen, give feedback, never add a song to any of their playlists, so they keep their quality high. Are you seeing artists that are like succeeding by using Groover? And what does a metric of success even look like?
It's a very large, interesting, and complicated question at the same time, because I think it's interesting what you're saying about like artists want fans, and I totally agree with that. Like artists want fans in the end, but we also see that artists want different things. That's also what we're trying to address with Groover. Or they want different things and they want different ways to get there. Fans is a goal in the end, but as we found between 3 and 4 different needs, I would say. The first one is indeed fans, audience, and they want numbers, and they want like to be sure that people are actually listening to their music. So it's more about like they want listeners, they want people, they want not to be alone. And I had like quotes by artists about like, I don't want just my mom and my dog to be listening to my music or things like that. Like it's about that, about like getting listeners, getting people at shows, and possibly making a living out of it. But it's also a different thing. Like not all artists have like, I want to make money or I want to make a living out of it. Some artists are also like, I want listeners first. And that's actually what we find they want first, most of the time. The second thing is sometimes they're really looking at making connections, because being an independent artist is a very alone job and occupation. You really feel all the time with your music. And also when you're building, especially right now in the social media era, when you're building your project around yourself, you feel even more alone with yourself and with your public face and private face being melted together and being very complicated. It's very complicated because every single criticism can affect you personally. Well, but it's actually addressing your professional musician figure. But connecting with people, meeting people that are enthusiastic about your music, that will become team members, that will help you grow, is really something a lot of artists are looking to. That's why we've always put a lot of energy on finding new record labels, managers, publishers, bookers on the platform as well. So this is one of the goals.
Cool.
Another goal is some of them are real like, what do people actually think about my music? It's like, because some people really want to get actual feedback. It's not like all musicians, it's not the majority, but there are really people who are looking for detailed feedback about the music. We've seen some people sending demos and making changes to their mix based on the feedback they receive, because they really wanted that external advice, because they're really true about this. They're open to feedback and everything. And they're like, when I asking my friends, they're just telling me it's good, because they're not, they don't want to tell me it's, I should change that. Or they don't know, don't have the expertise or anything. And the fourth thing we've seen is, and it's one of the things that is not like, it's more hidden behind the other ones. It's more about like many artists have the imposter syndrome and feel they're not legitimate, make music, or they're looking for legitimacy. They're looking for the proof that what they're doing can touch someone and can be meaningful and can have impact, even if it's not about numbers. So getting in touch with a blogger, or I don't know, an editor at Rolling Stone Argentina that's going to like your music and feature it. Maybe not a lot of people are going to actually see the article and listen to it. So it's maybe not going to bring you that many listeners. But that piece of like writing from an editor that you don't know that has written something about your music because they liked it, it's something that can be so powerful to push you as an artist to keep on creating, keep on pushing the boundaries. It's also something you can use as something you can publish on your own socials and show to people that actual people are liking your music, and it acts as social proof, like, which is a very sociological thing. It's like we're looking at what other people like to decide to have an interest to that first. Most people, like, we're looking, like, if we have, I don't know, all our best friends that are in love with a TV series on Netflix or something like that, we're probably going to have a look, because we're like, okay, I want to see what it is about. Like, a lot of people I appreciate are appreciating that, so I might appreciate that as well. So this is an important part of it. So in that sense, there are many ways Groover, by connecting you with people, can be efficient, which is not only about like bringing listeners. But to go back to your point, and sorry for that big explanation.
I just want to pause for a second, because you're absolutely right, and I think I framed that with a far narrower view of what success could look like. And I appreciate you outlining all the various ways that artists determine what their own personalized metric of success is. And you're absolutely right. If Rolling Stone writes an article saying that this is a brilliant album, that's going to power somebody. Even if only 2 people read that article, that's going to power them for the next few years to be like, wow, like Rolling Stone, even if it's Rolling Stone in Argentina, and no one, like, and like you said, yes, social proof, you can post that, more people are going to pay attention. It adds legitimacy, all of that feedback. I didn't even really think about that, because like the artists that I'm working with, they're not interested in feedback.
Most of them are not.
They're like,
most of them are not. I agree. Right. Yeah.
But if you're in the middle of nowhere, and you don't have a music community, and you don't have people to bounce this off of, and you don't have, trained ears, that's a legitimate point. So continue. Yeah.
Yeah. And to go back to your initial point about, like, if we focus on how artists are looking for listeners and fans, I think, like, you're right. All artists are looking for that. They're not only looking for that, but a lot of them are looking for that, for fans, for listeners, for sure. And in that sense, it comes to another thing that you mentioned, is like, what is a metric of success? And it depends a lot of what are the expectations. What is your expectation as an artist? Like, are you looking to grow in a specific, very narrow community of like a very specific genre, where possibly you're gonna have very little numbers on Spotify, but you're gonna be able to book shows that are gonna be sold out to 300 or 500 people, because everyone in this community are gonna know about your music, and you're gonna be able to make a living out of it. Also, like, an example is like when you look at DJs, for example, you have DJs that are paid a lot of money to play in clubs, and they are touring around the world. And when you look at the numbers on Spotify, they have, I don't know, a few thousand monthly listeners, and that's all.
Right,
but they didn't make they didn't build their fan base this way. So it will depend on a lot of factors, and will depend a lot of what you want to achieve, and also the environment in which you are, which is based on a lot of criteria. It can be the country you're in, it can be the music you're making, the genre of music you're making. If I give you an example, like in the beginning we were working a lot with Quebec. So Quebec is like the French region of Canada. There are 8 million inhabitants there. When you have a track that goes over 100,000 streams, I won't say you're a celebrity, but almost. Like, there are so few artists that go like this. It's so specific especially when they sing in French, with the French, like the Quebec accent and everything, that to get 100,000 people to listen to that track there is like, they already have all the record labels, independent record labels there, that are looking after them, and they know about them. They're booking them on shows. Maybe they're touring, they have grants to go to Europe and tour and everything. And when you look at their monthly listeners and their listeners, it's quite low compared to what you can get in France. But then even in France, when you look at people who are successful in France, they are not successful in the US to the scale of that market. So it's it's a very tough thing. So it's more about like, what are you looking to do? Why are you looking to get some listens or streams on Spotify? Is it a way for you to achieve something else? Or is it something you're looking at because you're thinking your music can grow a lot on that? And if I give you another example, if you look at like lo-fi beats or chill hip hop music, these artists are not touring. They're never playing live. They're making a lot of music their goal and how they measure their goals is by the number of streams they're generating on Spotify, because they're thinking it means a lot of people are listening to our music to chill, to get sleep, to things like that. It's their goal. When you talk to them, it's like, we want to like make that music that will smooth people and calm people and everything. So the metric of success depends on what you want to achieve, but also personally as an artist, but also on the environment, the style of music, and the country you're in, the scene you're in, and everything. Sorry for this bit preamble, but if we go back to
that's super helpful, and you're totally right. So let me ask this a different way, or ask a different question. For the artists who are interested in getting more monthly listeners, streams, listeners that will theoretically trigger algorithmic playlists, maybe even, get on the radar of some editorial playlists or something like that, get more listeners in that sense that will eventually convert to fans of those artists, because we just established that's not everyone, which is totally
I'll get to
fair.
the point. You're right.
but of those artists, is Groover effective, and can it be a helpful tool? And if so, tell me how, and give me some examples, because I've like, this, but to listeners, I've tested Groover. I've tested with a few different artists, a few different campaigns, a few different songs, and the campaigns would have cost a few $100s, maybe a little bit more. You comped me, thank you. But to test this out, but I know these artists, these are professional artists. These are they're working professional artists. They have I know the quality. I know they're of quality. They've worked with XYZ, Grammy nominated, blah blah blah. Doesn't matter. I know that they are a level of quality. They're competitive. They're professional. They are very extremely professional artists. Now, I would not have deemed those campaigns quote unquote successful, in the sense that maybe I submitted to 50 different curators. I spent probably 4 hours hand picking these curators, maybe even more, to be honest, more time, because I wanted to try it a couple different ways. One campaign, I spent the time, and I'm like, I went through every single curator. I clicked through their playlist. I listened to the playlist. I'm like, this would fit. And even with that one, my success rate for that one artist, for that one campaign, was like 19% or something like that, and I got like 7 shares, the 50 some people I submitted to, or maybe a little bit less because some didn't get to it or whatever. I calculated it's like 19%, not including the ones that didn't get to it. So it was but only 7 shares, and to be honest, that didn't like really move the needle. Then I did another one where I'm like, let me just try this. I'm not going to spend the 4 or 5 hours. I'm just going to select the genre categories and just hit all of them, So I submitted to a bunch more. I just hit all of them. As I started to go through, I'm just like, wow, this was an EDM playlist. Why are they in the indie rock category? But whatever. I didn't spend the time to vet them. I just went through. I'm just like, go indie rock. Give me alt rock. Give me, this is the song. And, it was, because I didn't handpick them, it was a slightly lower, but it was a 14% share rate. But forgetting the share rate, I'm looking at the playlist, and the number of streams or listeners it brought in was fairly negligible. It didn't from my scene, it didn't trigger anything. Did I do something wrong? Or are those the kind of results that we can expect? Is a few hundred more listeners, a few thousand streams when you spend $300 or whatever. Was I supposed to spend $1,000 to get something? Well, do you have any kind of you've been doing this a long time now? Is there any you spend this amount of money, your song is of this quality or whatever, and you can expect to get these number of listeners or streams or something like that, or the success rate from submission to placement average is, I don't even know if I'm in the average, 19%, 14%, 30%. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. It's actually the exact point. It's it will depend a lot on the results you'd get. And I don't think you did anything wrong. And I think Groover won't work the same way for all artists. And it's not always, and it's often not about like the quality of the production of the song itself. It's more about,
Okay.
is your music or your track tailored to please curators or playlist curators, or does it match what they're looking for? It's all, a lot is about targeting,
Okay.
but you
Right.
might sometimes have the best targeting possible and still not get very satisfactory results. So
Right.
that's the very tough thing about Groover, and it's a thing that it's um, affecting even like mentally, I would say, our team all the time, is that we can't make all artists happy with Groover because we dependent on what the creators will like, and the creators are free to decline or accept the track. They go like, the thing is, we have artists that are really getting into some playlists that are very selective, that might have, I don't know, a 3 to 5% acceptance rate. We also have some playlists that have a 20% acceptance rate and that are very impactful. I know that there were other people, I think, in your team that used the platform and that got like better acceptance rate as well. So it depends. The average on Groover is around 20 to 25%, but some people get accepted by everyone and some people get accepted by no one. And sometimes the people you accept, like we even call it the happiness or sadness rate, is we have a percentage of artists that are using Groover, they don't get accepted at all by the creators. It's something we're trying to fight to help them find the right, because we really think there are creators for everyone. But all these creators won't have the same impact. And the fact that the data about their impact is not that open and publicly open makes it complicated to gauge the impact you can expect from submitting to a playlist. But if I give you an example, there are some music styles, there are some formats of song that are perfect for playlists, and that will get accepted by everyone. And for example, if I give you like an area where Groover is particularly strong with independent playlists would be indie folk. In the indie folk part. But if it's too country, it maybe not going to work. But in that sense, if you do something that is,
what is indie
like,
folk? Are we talking like Boy Genius, like Phoebe Bridgers indie folk?
Yeah,
what is indie
Phoebe
folk
Bridgers, Big Thief, this kind of like artists, for example. And we have really good creators on the platform for that. We have Alex Rainbird, we have Burp.fm, and we have seen tracks from artists who were coming from nowhere, like it was maybe one of their first releases, but it was perfectly tailored for these channels or playlists. They submit a campaign that is around 50 to 100 euros, as you were mentioning. They're accepted by everyone, and they get to like their first 10,000, 20,000 monthly listeners. Also, like what you were saying about the metrics of success is that something like, if I give you another example, like there's an artist I love. His music is not like what's gonna work with the majority of people, because it's more like not anchored in the past, but it has a lot of influence from the 80s or the 70s. It has a modern touch, but the tracks are 5 minutes long, 6 minutes long. I love them. I absolutely love them. It was the artist I preferred discovering on Groover, and I made like a shit ton of feedback and listened to so much music. And so I got like instantly a crush on that artist. And when I send campaign, I'm very like, I'm disappointed in the results and why people are not picking it, because sometimes it's like the track is too long, or it's like they say it sounds too much like, I don't know, Nick Drake or Bruce Springsteen, stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, but this is like, it's actually great. If you listen to the whole album, like you can be sometimes
right.
But at the same time, time, he's not getting that many streams. I think he's around like 5,000 monthly listeners. Honestly, he's like a professional studio engineer. He's an amazing artist. There's an amazing universe around his. I think it's called Henry Flower, if you want to look at it without the vowels. And cool. He's submitted to Burp FM, and Burp FM was one of the biggest ones that accepted him, and they decided to book him for their show at South by. So it's cool. the campaign in itself was not a success, but there was one acceptance that's significant, like had a significant impact. And we had like that with someone who was supervising a show in France for Netflix. She ended up selecting 4 tracks that she discovered on Groover for the Netflix show. And I was like, okay, that artist, like sometimes it's just one. And it's what's crazy. Like we got so many artists who signed with a record label and manager, and they were like, they signed with like one label, like they like, I met the person that did the most for my music and my career ever, and got it brought me the strength. And when you look at the campaign, maybe the rest of the results they got were not good. So it's more about like, I would say like, Groover, you might get very disappointed about it. You might like even send me an insult message and I might cry in my bed at night and everything. But at the same time, if you don't do it, you might not get that opportunity that might significantly move the needle. But at the same time, you might not want to take that risk because it might also put you down and everything. So it's more about asking yourself, are you ready to get like these rejections? Are you ready to maybe not having too much impact about it? Do you have the budget? Do you have the money to invest on that? And we try to put it at a level that it's available for everyone. But
and I want to talk about the feedback and the rejection a little bit. I mean, because like, I wasn't, I don't believe, at least not this past year, because I've been testing Groover for a few years. This past year, I wasn't testing like the music that I created, just for some artists that I manage. Because like, I've tested these kinds of platforms through the years. And as an artist creating my own music, like, the feedback can be frustrating when it sounds like these people don't know what they're talking about, when like there's two pieces of feedback that are literally contradicting each other. Great vocals, awful vocals, or whatever, like incredible mix to this mix needs to be more professional. Like literally, like I can't take that feedback. Like, what are you talking about? So, but even when I submitted an artist that I manage, I did actually have a visceral reaction to a lot of this feedback, because I'm reading through this feedback and I'm just like, man, like, one, this is a professional artist. This is a master. This track is released. Like, I can't go in and change the mix. Don't tell me to change the mix. Like, what do you like? Or like the instrumentation is not what you would do. I don't care. Neither does the artist care what you would do. You're not the artist. This was an artistic decision. And like the discussion around like the mix, there was a few people saying like, oh, the mix isn't strong. I'm like, the mix, my ears are very good. The mix is great. It's not even my music. I manage this artist. And even if it wasn't my ears, like this mixing engineer has won Grammys. Like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, So it's like, I'm reading through this and it's like, come on, you gotta be out of your mind. But like, I get it. Cause like, these are 20-year-old kids that are not musicians. They're not engineers. They're not music. They might be music lovers, but they don't know what they're talking about. So I'm almost like, why am I even getting feedback from these people? Like, this is not helpful at all.
I totally understand that, and it's a big point, because like we're telling them that to not give like advice about production when the track is released. Like, we have a whole guide with feedback, and it's adapted to each type of creator. We have a dedicated team that is talking to creators all day long and everything. The thing is, these are people and many of them are very clumsy, and they're not all modeled on like on us, and we ban a lot of creators because of that. Like, just so you know, like we're monitoring them, we're banning a lot of them. And sometimes it's complicated because, like, for example, I can take an example, but there was like, there's one creator, I won't say the name or anything, but the feedback was not that good. He was like writing with a lot of like mistakes and everything when he was writing, like not proper English or proper French or anything. And at the same time, he had a very cool radio show that everyone was following in a specific scene in Paris. And I was like, when he accepts and loves an artist and features them, it has so much impact. At the same time, he's such a pain in the ass when he's answering people, and I'm like, what do I do there? It's like, do I keep them on the platform because they're gonna maybe bring satisfaction to 5% of the people, and it's gonna significantly move the needle for them. At the same time, for 95% of people, they're gonna want to crash their computer. And I'm like, what do I do for that? And the thing is, like, I'm trying to think with the artist point of view, like saying, the business decision would be ban them, because you're like probably a part of this 95% of artists won't be using maybe Groover again because of that particular feedback. And that's one of the most frustrating thing, is that we have people talking to us on the support channel, and sometimes it's saying, this guy told me that, and they're insulting us and everything. And I'm looking at their whole feed, and their feedback is quite good. Like, it's honestly 80-90% of the feedback is good. It's detailed. They're getting information out of it. But there's this one reply they got, and they're fixating on it. And they're getting very pissed and enraged about that piece of feedback. And I'm like,
right,
man, how can we, like, everything we do is like, when you have 2,500 curators, we always gonna have like someone who's in a bad day and is gonna write like the bad thing and everything. We're like, what?
Yep.
And at the same time, we're like, we try to remove that the feedbacks on it, because we know it's not always bringing like a lot of value and everything. But the thing is, when we were removing the feedback, the curators were not putting the same level of attention on the track. And we really like saw it like an pure A/B testing. It was like the acceptance rate was 3 to 4 times lower when they didn't have to write feedback.
Yeah.
And just had to listen to the track. So we think about ways like, now you're not forced to look at all the feedback. You can filter by like all the shares and everything and just look at these replies. So you don't have to look at the feedback. And at the same time, a lot of artists still want to look at the feedback. And at the same time, if you don't have the feedback, how can you be absolutely sure that the person has listened to the music? Which is what I'm saying to most of these artists, is like, try to take it as a proof of listening, as the proof that the track has been like, and if it's not relevant for you, like, don't put too much attention on it. It's a subjective, it's a point of view. It's someone that maybe has no expertise of what you're doing. But it's also like, not everybody is going to like your music, and people are going to say silly things about it. And it's very enraging. But it's at the same time, it's like, I don't have the solution to be sure that you won't be receiving some pieces of feedback that are not relevant. And at the same time, offering the possible opportunities of not a lifetime, but like a significant opportunity that you wouldn't have got otherwise, if you're not getting the feedback from the system. I don't know if I'm clear.
No, that's a great point, and I understand, and I had my own personal experience with it, and you're getting the experiences of all your users, which I don't envy your position, to be honest. Like, having to balance that. It is. I don't have the answers. It is not an easy position to have to kind of manage that from both sides. And I can, as an artist, as a manager, and also a playlist curator. Now, full disclosure, like, I'm not on any of these playlisting platforms. I don't run my playlist to make money. I don't make any money with it. I still take, people DM me, and I'll put the songs on if I like them or not, and I won't give them feedback. But I will say it's not a good fit, or it is a good fit. But they're not paying me for it either. So it's like, I'm in it for very different reasons, and I know that there are probably a lot of curators on Groover that are making maybe a living or making significant revenue from this.
Yeah, I think some of them are making significant revenue. Not all of them are using it for the same thing. We also have a lot of curators who are also like managers or label owners, or they're also like artists, and they're actually using the credits to run campaigns for their own music on the platform, which is interesting.
Oh, interesting. You can get paid through credits, and then you can turn around and use those credits and submit. That's fascinating. I didn't know that. Okay. Cool.
We have a lot of like, most of the record labels are doing that. You also have like the new, like, it talked about the DJs that we have onboarding on the platform.
Yeah, what is category. The DJ thing?
So we got more into understanding the electronic music scene that is very different, and the role of DJs in that scene. Like, a lot of artists are getting known because they're getting played by DJs, even if they don't have like big numbers on Spotify or anything. And being played by DJs is the legitimacy you're looking for in that scene. And we realized that, and there are some systems to send your music to DJs, but they are not really systems where you're really getting feedback and you can make connections. And what's interesting is that DJs are also producers. So we already see some connections where the DJ likes a track and they want to make a remix, and then they meet for a drink in New York or in Paris or anywhere. So it's really interesting to see how it goes that way. And most of the DJs are using the credits to promote their own tracks, their own productions to like other DJs or playlists or record labels. So there's something like that is quite interesting in that. But to go back to your point about like some curators are making a living, I think some of them are. A lot of the playlist curators, if we go back to playlist curators, what they do with the money is they invest on ads on Facebook or Instagram to promote their own playlists.
Right.
And they do that to try to really have like campaigns that are really targeting the right listeners so that they can join the playlist and possibly listen to it, and it will bring more streams and impact to the artists on the playlist.
Right.
And it's one of the efficient ways to grow playlists today. The audience.
Yeah, and that is a way that I've grown my own playlist, is through ads on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that, and that makes sense because that is a legitimate way to bring in more actual human listeners. It takes more time and a bit of money, but that is a way that you can grow your playlist, and other than bots, because right, I mean, it makes more sense, which we didn't like get to the core of it, like, you know, in part of why
Actual
when I was
listeners in the
doing
end.
my research, when I was doing my research of which playlist I wanted to submit to, I know better than to just look at how many saves they have. So I would not only just look at the saves, I'd actually click through the artists on the playlist, and I would do my own math and be like, okay, how many monthly listeners can I infer that this playlist is sending these artists based on how long they've been on the playlist and where the playlist is listed on their Discover More on their Spotify, you know. So you can go down there. So, you know, more active playlists will theoretically get more submissions, which they'll make more money because more people are going to choose that playlist to submit to. That also being said, when I just did the send every single playlist that has indie rock in their genre category, I'm sure there was a bunch of playlists that had 0 active listeners, because we have no idea really how to monitor that. And they got my $2 or $4 or whatever it was, just because I didn't really vet it. And that's just like another issue, I guess.
It's something we're trying to vet a lot. So it's an important part that I didn't mention, is that we're really vetting all the creators and pros when they apply to Groover. And we're rejecting between 80 to 90% of the people who are applying to become curator.
Okay, well, that's nice to know.
That's a good point. What's tough in that part to get into the middle of it is that we're vetting people when they're getting on the platform, and one of the ways we do it is we ask them to add specific tracks that we are able to monitor the streams from, and we're measuring how many streams it's generating for these tracks. So there's a whole onboarding and vetting process in the beginning. One of the things that is complicated is that sometimes a playlist can be perfect when they apply, but then it gets less active, and maybe in 2 or 3 months it generates fewer streams. So we need to actively monitor them over time, which is one of the technical parts that we're building up and building and building. And what I was mentioning with artist tools, is it a good playlist, and this data we're getting from outside, is how we measure them over time. You can definitely, as an artist or as a manager, use them directly, and I really recommend, if you want to get into really the essence of that, and you're ready to spend time on understanding playlists a lot, you can spend time on artist tools and Is It a Good Place? They are really great tools managed by really great people as well, that really want to get to the bottom of it. And I don't have any links to them like commercially or anything. It's just they're really doing a great job, and I think more artists should be using them because it's really helpful tools. Yeah.
Well, Dorian, this was a very fascinating conversation. I appreciate you going deep with me on it and answering all of my questions so transparently. And we have gone way over time, but for those of you, the people that are still listening, I appreciate it, and it was a fascinating conversation, which is why I kept it going. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
And I have one question about that. Are you talking about an artist, or are you talking more about someone who's getting into the business, or,
whatever it means to you? You can take it whichever way you want. You can talk about artists. You can talk about yourself.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think we touched on some of these points during the interview, but I think it depends a lot on what you're looking for. So the first thing I would say is like truly ask yourself that. And that's the way you'll find how to make it authentically, because making it is, you're going to make it if you're happy about what you're doing yourself, and not everyone would be happy with how someone thinks they're making it their way, and you wouldn't want to do it that way. So it's about like finding what you want. And then I would say there's something linked with growth, how you're growing as a person, as an artist, and to find your pace. I wouldn't say like any artist is going to make it because they're going hyper fast, hyper growth, going very, very like at a hyper speed. But it's more about finding your pace where you're both able to be creative and achieving the goals that you set yourself, And I saw a video that was interesting, but I don't remember who it was, but he was saying that he was setting goals, and when he was close to reach them or he was reaching them, he was setting new goals. I think it's an interesting thing to have, to always have goals where you project yourself to be sure you're setting your own goals and you're trying to achieve them, and you're always like growing and going on a path. And I think if you find the energy to do what you love and what will make you evolve on this path, I think you'll be able to say that you make it. If you're happy to be in it and you find the right people, you surround yourself with the right people, and you're happy with what you achieve, and you always have goals and you're always excited by them, I think you will have make it. And maybe sometimes so you have made it, and maybe one day you'll find you won't have any new goals in that, and you won't be excited about this. And you should also truly ask yourself, like, would I want to continue that way? It's a tough thing, because it's discovering yourself at the same time as like trying to make it in an environment that you don't entirely control.
Dorian, thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you, Ari.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids, with music by Grassroots District, and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.